Reb Chaim Volozhin in Ruach Chaim tells an amazing story. The Taz was giving a shiur once, and a woman barged in. He said, "Help, my son is dying. Please help him." So the Taz, with his great anava, said, "I'm not the Rabbi, so how could I help him?" So he goes, "No, I don't mean you, Taz. I mean your Torah, the schus of Torah. Because the pasuk says, "B'davar hazeh tarichu yamim." And the Taz says, "Fine, we're going to give the schus of our learning to this child." And miraculously, immediately, the child had a recovery. Obviously, Torah is kihem chayenu v'orech yemenu on a very literal sense, and it's very reassuring, and it's a great chizuk to see Yidden want to learn even in such trying times. And I hope that our learning should be a schus for ganz Klal Yisrael, especially Yashikoyach, Rabbi Baruch Bold, and Simcha Deutsch, who are keeping the Torah going, and to a wonderful Yedid, Rabbi David Pine, who came to my house and was willing to record this so Klal Yisrael could see it. And let's continue learning and holding on to the Eitz Chaim of Torah, and we'll certainly see the end to this epidemic. It is hashgacha pratis, as it always is when you deal with the tzibur, that the sugya that I prepared to learn with this week, besides being neigeya, halacha l'mais, besides being a geshmaka sugya, is a sugya we could say tein l'chacham v'yech kamoid, a very big, a very broad sugya. So I'll try to give the basics, and each person, the time that we have now, there's more time for learning because of this situation, and we could take advantage of harnessing more the koyach of Torah, the schus of Torah. So I'll say tein l'chacham v'yech kamoid. I'll give you the outline, and each person on his own time, could delve into it to add. And certainly, if they want to call me with questions, I'll be glad to hear. The question is a very basic question, a very fundamental question, in a certain sense, a global question. I am in my house on Friday afternoon, and I pick up a phone and I call a guy should work who's in Eretz Yisroel, and I start talking to him. Is that a problem? After all, for the guy, it is Shabbos proper in Eretz Yisroel. I'm telling him what to do. Is that a mir la'akum? For the guy, it's Shabbos. For me, it's Friday. Or how about I go to Eretz Yisroel for Yomtov, and as we know, a ben chutz la'aretz in Eretz Yisroel has to keep Yomtov Sheini, so I have to keep all of the halachos of Yomtov Sheini. But for my Israeli relative, it's already Isru Chag or Chalamayit. Can I ask them to do melacha for me? Or a more timely question, now I was looking forward to the summer months, there's many people make early Shabbos. If I made early Shabbos and I'm ready after Kiddush, after Ma'ariv, can I ask my neighbor to do melacha for me if it's still day, if it's still Friday afternoon, it's still before Shkia? And these and many other questions are the focus of our shiur this morning. But if you want to reduce it to one simple, intriguing, and maybe it sounds like a funny question, but it's certainly not. Is it possible for me to be Mechalel Shabbos or Mechalel Yom Tov on Friday? And that's basically what it is. Or is it possible for me to Mechalel Shabbos by having someone who it's Friday do melacha for me? I am talking to a guy, for him it's Shabbos, but for me it's Friday. How could I be over on Chilul Shabbos? So that's the question that we're going to have to try to find a precedent for this question. So what comes to mind is an absolutely fascinating question. Imagine I spent Shabbos in England, and after Shabbos I boarded a Concorde. I guess we could say Zechreinu Levracha, it's no longer in existence, but it was feasible that I got onto a plane after Shabbos in England, and I flew to America, and I landed in America when it is still Shabbos. Okay, it's also possible with the various time zones, and a person crosses the from one country to the other, and he goes over the international date line. But the question is simple. I kept Shabbos, and now I land in a country that it is Shabbos again. And the Poskim seem to agree, it's a very nice tshuva in the B'tzei Lachoch, Mechelik Dalet Pei Gimel, that I have to keep Shabbos, even though I already kept Shabbos. I land in America, I have to keep Shabbos, and maybe I shouldn't even do that trick because I'm flying into a Shabbos zone. Okay, it's Yedua the Ger Rebbe in the Michtevei Torah Lamed Hey, and it's quoted in the Piskei Tshuva, Siman Reish Nun Beis, felt that if once you kept Yom Kippur and you fly into a zone that's Yom Kippur again, you don't have to keep a second Yom Kippur. But the Poskim seem to agree that if I keep Shabbos and I fly into a country that it's still Shabbos, I have to keep Shabbos again. Is that what we're looking for? Because I already kept Shabbos. So why do I have to keep Shabbos again? Is that a raya that I could be Mechalel Shabbos on a weekday? The answer is, of course it's not a raya. The reason why the Poskim feel that I have to keep Shabbos in America is because Shabbos depends on where I am. So it doesn't help that I kept Shabbos once. I wasn't Yoitza. Shabbos is wherever you are. So I kept Shabbos, but I'm Zoicha to a second Shabbos. Wonderful. But our case is fundamentally different. I'm in America on Friday, and I'm talking to my guy on Shabbos. Where's the Chilul Shabbos if it's still Friday for me? I am in a total Friday zone. So I'll tell you another question, and let's consider this. You need imagination, but I'll soon tell you a better mashal. Imagine I'm sitting in my house in Brooklyn Friday afternoon at 6 o'clock, Erev Shabbos. It's an hour and a half before Shkia. But I have a very, very long string. Okay, you need imagination for this. And the string goes all the way to an old-fashioned apartment in Mea She'arim that's attached to someone's light bulb with a little chain. I pull my long string and I put on a light in Eretz Yisroel, an apartment in Mea She'arim. Is that Chilul Shabbos? I'm in Friday zone in America and I do melacha in Eretz Yisroel, in fact. Now today you don't need imagination for this shayla. Imagine I'm sitting Friday afternoon in my house in Brooklyn, and with remote control I activate a factory to start working in Eretz Yisroel on Shabbos. Is that Chilul Shabbos? So the Poskim seem to agree it's not. Why not? Because you can't be Mechalel Shabbos on Friday. But again, that's not a raya to our case. Because at the end of the day, there is no Chilul Shabbos taking place on Friday. I am in America, I do melacha in America. Who cares if the melacha takes place in Eretz Yisroel? But I can't be Mechalel Shabbos in America on Friday. But our case is fundamentally different. Because the guy that's doing the melacha is doing melacha on Shabbos in Eretz Yisroel. Or the Yid that's doing melacha for me when on my early Shabbos is doing melacha on my Shabbos. So we need another precedent. Perhaps think about this. I have a vending machine in a place, in a camp, and there are Goyish workers. So we once spoke about this. According to most Poskim, I could keep the vending machine open, even though Goyim buy soda on Shabbos. Why is it mutter? The answer is, if I'm not doing anything, why should it be asa? So maybe the same applies. I could call a guy in Eretz Yisroel. I could ask my neighbor to do melacha after my early Shabbos. If I don't do anything, I am not held responsible. But again, it's not a raya. Because here, there's no human being doing melacha. I set up a machine, and the machine does melacha. So that indeed is a machlokes Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, and Masechta Shabbos, Daf Yud Zayin. The concept of Shvisas Kelim, and we paskin that there is no chiyuv of Shvisas Kelim. Just like I could put up a raw cholent right before the Zman Friday afternoon, and it cooks into Shabbos, it's okay because I didn't do any melacha. So too, I could set up a machine that does melacha on Shabbos. So that's why those cases are mutter. Of course, you have to worry about kinyan on Shabbos and maybe schar Shabbos, that's a different issue. But the basic yisoid is, if there's no human doing melacha on Shabbos, there's no Chilul Shabbos. But in our case, I am delegating a guy, or lahavda, my neighbor, to do melacha for me on Shabbos. There's a melacha taking place by a human being. So then I thought of a well-known Chasam Sofer in Orchaim Siman Tezvav, the Maschil Su. The Chasam Sofer has his tremendous yisoid, it's quoted often. The Chasam Sofer says that many mitzvahs, you can't delegate a shliach. I can't tell someone to put on tefillin for me, because my body has to wear tefillin. The same is regarding Averis. Averis, I am not allowed to do an Avera. Says the Chassam Sofer, but when it comes to Shabbos, the mitzvah of Shabbos is uniquely different. Shabbos, my guf, I have to rest. And therefore, says the Chassam Sofer, if I have a guy do melacha for me on Shabbos, the concept of shlichus doesn't really apply. Because my guf was nach, I rested on Shabbos, and that's the basis of the mitzvah of Shabbos. So if I'm not violating melacha personally, there would be no chilul Shabbos deraisa, even if I delegate a shliach, and even if shlichus would be effective. And the Beis Meah in Even Ezer Siman Hey Siv Dalet has the same yisoid, because Shabbos is all about gufay nach. Oh, this is enlightening. It doesn't make a difference if someone else does melacha. The question is me. Was I resting or not? Now, perhaps we could apply that to our concept. I am keeping Shabbos in my early Shabbos, or I am keeping Friday. Who cares if the guy does melacha in Eretz Yisroel on Shabbos? But the truth is, although the Chassam Sofer and the Beis Meah said it, but it certainly needs some fine-tuning. It can't be as it is, that if I do nothing, I'm okay. Because it's a pasuk in the Torah that says differently. It's actually in the Seres HaDibros. The Torah says, I have to keep Shabbos, leisasa kamalacha, ata, bincha, vitecha, my young children, avdecha, behemtecha. In fact, my animal can't do malacha on my behalf. That's the concept of shvisas behemtai. Needless to say, my animal is not Jewish and is certainly not higia lechinuch. So why is there a problem if my animal does melacha? Why is there a problem if I instruct a katan to do melacha on my behalf? The answer is, part of my Shabbos extends to my children, lahavdol to my behema, and as we'll soon see, even to Amir la'akum. So definitely, even though my guf was nach, it's still possible chilul Shabbos if something that's an extension of me does melacha. And again, the greatest raya is, I can't tell a guy to do melacha for me on Shabbos. My guf is nach, but we look at it as if it's me that's doing that chilul Shabbos. So now we're back to our group of questions. Can I call on Friday afternoon a guy to do melacha for me on Shabbos in Eretz Yisroel? Or I made an early Shabbos? Or a Yomtov Sheini question? How do we classify this unique situation? Because of different time zones, I could be Friday, and my delegate, whether it's a guy or a yid in Eretz Yisroel, is doing melacha. So Shimru Sechi Nafshechem, let us have some simchas HaTorah in this times of crisis. Let me tell you a Gemara that seems outdated, but in reality, it's extremely relevant for our subject. Says the Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Nun Aleph, Mutar la'adam loymer lechaverei shmar li peiros shebetchumcha. Now let me explain. It's very simple. Imagine it's me and you and orchard in that order, like A, B, C. I live to the left, you live in the center, and on the far right, there's an orchard, an apple orchard that belongs to me. Now, the logistics is simple. I could walk to you on Shabbos because you're within my Erev. But my orchard is out of my tchum. I can't go to my own orchard. I can go to you. But here's the catch. You are closer to the orchard than I am, and you could walk to the orchard. So says the Gemara, I could walk to you on Shabbos and tell you, please go to my orchard and watch my orchard. Now the question that's obvious is, what's going on here? If I'm not allowed to go to my orchard because it's out of the tchum, how could I tell you to go there on Shabbos? I'm instructing to do an issa for me. Because for me it's absolutely awesome midrabanan to go to that orchard. More so, I'm not allowed to talk about melacha even if I don't do melacha. I'm not allowed to say, tomorrow I'm going to paint my house. That's the issa d'Rabbanan of a daber dava. I'm not allowed to talk about mechilul Shabbos even if I don't do it. So how could I tell you, go to my orchard, if for me that's chutz l'tchum, so it's an issa d'Rabbanan. So I am talking about a clear-cut issa. And indeed, the Rashba on that Gemara asked this question. But let me read the answer, because his words are the yesod that we need for this morning. Zok the Rashba, the kivan shehu mutta Yisrael chaverei l'shamram, ein b'mirasoi klum. Since you, the Yid living in the middle, is allowed to go to that orchard because it's within his tchum, so I could tell him to go to the orchard on my behalf. Now, it seems like the Rashba rephrased the question. But I know it's mutter for my friend to go, but I'm not going to go. A can't go to C. I know B could go to C, but A can't. So how could I tell him to do that? So Tyra Yid in the Hezbollah is very pashut. Since my friend, or we call him B, is allowed to go to C, so going to C from B, my friend going to the orchard, is not a chilul Shabbos. It's a ma'aseh heta. So I'm telling him to do a heta. What's wrong with telling a Yid to do a heta on Shabbos? Minimally it's v'daber dava, because for me going to the orchard is asa, but that's the point, says the Rashba, apparently. Since for him to go to the orchard is mutter, it is not implicitly a chilul Shabbos. I'm telling him to do a heta. So to go to the orchard from my friend is not a chilul Shabbos, and therefore not a violation of v'daber dava. Now, Rabbi say, let's think. Is this relevant to our question? Perhaps. Don't forget, I made early Shabbos. I can't do anything. But my friend, it's still Friday afternoon. He didn't get Mekabel Shabbos. So me telling him to put on the light seems very similar to this Gemara. Because it's mutter for him, and therefore it's mutter for him, there's no v'daber davar as far as I'm concerned. And if you said that, Baruch Shekivanta, that's the next words of the Rashba. Zok the Rashba, from here I could learn. If a Yid, and we'll get me to keep to the same case, if I'm Mekabel Shabbos, I could tell my friend who was not yet Mekabel Shabbos to do melacha plainis, hoyo v'inasis beheta la'oisa oisa. Gewalt mamish, what we're looking for. Since for me it's not chilul Shabbos, for him it's not chilul Shabbos, I could tell him to do it. So in other words, he's taking the Gemara of the orchard and applying it literally, exactly to our case of early Shabbos. I could tell my neighbor to do melacha for me. Now he doesn't spell this out, but I think it's pashut. That would also explain why there's no violation of a daber dava. Because true, for me to put on a light is chilul Shabbos, but to tell my friend to put on a light is perfectly mutter. So b'yesa bia, or b'yesa gishmak, let me even make this more gishmak. Because if I tell a guy to do melacha for me on Shabbos, even though for the guy there's no chilul Shabbos, but the dibur is asa because this action is asa. That's the chilul Shabbos, for me to tell a guy to do it. So if that's chilul Shabbos, it's also v'daber dava, because this action is absolutely asa. And that's what the Rashba says. Don't mistakenly think that you're allowed to tell the guy to do melacha on Shabbos, because if it's Shabbos for everybody, it's asa. But this case where it's not Shabbos for my friend, the Rashba is convinced I could tell him do melacha for me, and Rabbi said this is the custom-made sauce that we're looking for our shayla. For me, it's Shabbos, and I can't do anything. But if I tell a Yid to do melacha on my behalf, it's mutter and there's no v'daber davar. But here we come to the last piece of this beautiful puzzle, and the Ran on our Gemara in Shabbos, V'li ein hani doin b'laraya. I don't understand the Rashba. He quotes the Rashba. He said, I don't understand. Because the case of the orchard has one redeeming factor that the early Shabbos doesn't. Because, says the Ran, if I would have burgenin, now this is a sugya which Mechem Daf Vyom will get to, and Daf Kuf Nun Mebeis, but even though the orchard is out of my tchum, but if I would have little huts along the way, which extends my tchum, then I myself could go to that orchard. Now again, I don't want to get into the details, but it's something similar, but it's not exactly, like I put down an Erev Tchumen. But borgenin is homes along the way that extends the Tchum. But whatever the exact details of borgenin is not negeya. But if there are borgenin, even if they put, I will soon see, even if a guy put them on Shabbos, so now I personally can walk to my apple orchard on Shabbos. Zokteran, that's why it's awesome. That's why it's mutter. Because the case of orchard is accessible even for me. But Tain is the Ran, the early Shabbos, true for the Yid, that's my neighbor, it's perfectly mutter. But for me, it is never mutter to do melacha on Shabbos. So in other words, what the Ran is introducing us to an interesting concept. There are three levels of Isurim. There's one Issa that is mutter for nobody, but nobody. Chilul Shabbos on Shabbos, there's no het of anybody. Then there's an Issa for me, but not for you, early Shabbos, but for me it's never mutter early Shabbos. And then there's the case of orchard, the Gemara in Shabbos Kuf and Aleph, that is taka mutter for him, and feasibly mutter for me if I had a borgenin. So Zakter Ran, to be mutter, we have to have both redeeming factors. Number one, the other person could do it, and feasibly I could do it had there been borgenin. But therefore, says the Ran, and I understand why that's mutter, because the melacha is not absolutely, categorically asa for me even. But the case of the early Shabbos, for the one that made early Shabbos, it's totally asa. Now apparently the Ran felt that we have to reduce this to a non-maisa issa objectively. And if I have a heta to it in any way, it's fine. But the early Shabbos is no heta. But the Rashba understood, no, as long as what I tell the Yid to do, I tell him to do melacha, it's mutter for him, it's mutter for me. But wait, we haven't seen anything yet. Tained the Beis Yosef in the end of Reish Samach Gimel, I don't know the Ran's question. Early Shabbos is also a subjective issa. Because had I, that made early Shabbos, not made early Shabbos, so it wouldn't be us. It's still an hour before Shkia. So what's the Iran's problem? Early Shabbos, says the Beis Yosef, is like the case of the orchard. Now, more than the Beis Yosef's taina, he's implying that to be makel, to allow me to tell my neighbor to do melacha, I need both preconditions. Number one, it's mutter for him, and it's feasibly mutter for me had I made early Shabbos. However, the big kasha that the Bach, the Drisha, and the Goyis Marlach, all on the Beis Yosef, in the end of Reish Samach Gimel, what they all ask is, I don't understand. You had the option of not making early Shabbos, wonderful. But once you made early Shabbos, it's Shabbos. And it's not revocable, l'chayra. So what they're saying is, the whole premise is wrong. You don't have to have a way of you, or me I should say, I don't have to have a way of doing melacha, that melacha on Shabbos. Because once I made early Shabbos, it's Shabbos. But the point is, as long as for the other person it's mutter, I could tell him do. Why is it mutter? For him it's not a ma'aseh issa, and for me it's not a dibur isur. Now, from here on in, there's a lot has been written to try to understand the Beis Yosef, the Bach, the Taz and our Simon. The end of Reish Samach Gimel has a long shtickle. He calls it a tshuva. Beautiful. If you have time, I advise you to look it up. But he seems to hold you don't have to have both preconditions. It's enough if I tell him to do a ma'aseh heta for him, that's fine. The Magen Avraham says differently. The Evan Oiz in the back has a beautiful discussion. The Levushay Srod, Sivkot and Lamed, the Machzah Shekel. And what I found really beautiful, the El Yerab and Sivkot and Lamed Ches comes from a totally different angle, and he says, wait a minute, even the early Shabbos is revocable. How? If I made Shabbos, is it revocable? So we mentioned something that we discussed in a shir once. The Levush holds, even though I made early Shabbos, that's because it's a form of a neder. But I could be shoyal on my neder, I could be mata neder, and I could revoke my early Shabbos. So what he's saying is that even the early Shabbos is revocable. But Rabbi, we have a very big agenda still, so let me just finalize this question. The Shulchan Aruch in the end of Reish Samach Gimel says clearly, if I made early Shabbos, I could tell you to do melacha. The Mishtabura and Sivkat and Yudzayin, the Aruch HaShulchan, and Sivkat and Chavav, both seem to say it's mutter simply because the Yid that's doing it is not doing a Ma'aseh Issa. In other words, you don't have to have both preconditions. It's enough if I tell a Yid to do melacha and it's mutter for him. Even if I can't revoke the early Shabbos, it makes no difference. The Magen Avraham seems to be machmir, but we have the Taz, Mishtabura, Aruch HaShulchan, and let's be very clear. Even though for me it's Shabbos, if for you that's doing it there is no Chilul Shabbos, it's mutter for me to instruct you to do that melacha. Now let us enjoy the fruit of our labor. Let us apply this to the numerous shilas. And let's start with a simple shayla that we began with. I made early Shabbos. I need a melacha to be done. I could go to my next door neighbor, ask him to do melacha for me, and it's mutter. Even if I already daven ma'ariv and I'm ready made kiddush. For me it's really Shabbos. The answer is so what? Zil basa taima. As long as you are allowed to do that melacha, I can instruct you to do that melacha. I saw the Rav Shulchan Aruch and Siv Chafei spells it out. Even if I didn't just make early Shabbos, but I daven ma'ariv, and I would add, even if I made kiddush. But since for you it's mutter, I could instruct you to do melacha. Next question is a fascinating shayla. Let's say I am a ma'achrin lotzeis. I cherish and I relish every moment of Shabbos, and I like to keep a very late Motzei Shabbos. My next door neighbor waits for 72 and then does melacha. And I decide I want to have a special Einik Shabbos by Suda Shlishis. Now I would say I want a pizza, but that's inappropriate. I want a hot soup for Suda Shlishis. Can I go to my neighbor who already made Avdallah, it's after the Zman, and ask him to cook me a hot soup that I could have for Shalosh Shudas? So it sounds strange. How are you going to eat hot soup that was cooked on your Shabbos? It sounds intimidating. How could I tell him to do it? I'm telling him to do an issa for me. How could I enjoy the soup? And how could I tell him, cook soup for me at Shabbos? It sounds like there's a bunch of isurim. But the Rabbi say this is mamash our Rashba. Since for him it's perfectly mutter to do melacha. Now, because he made Avdallah, I can instruct him to do that. But I'll tell you something even more beautiful. Even the Ran would agree this is mutter. For me it's Shabbos. True, but don't forget, since I could say Baruch HaMavda Mekodesh L'chol at any given moment, even I could cook that soup. In other words, for me to tell a Yid to do melacha on early Shabbos, Friday afternoon, late Ran is not mutter, because I can't revoke the early Shabbos. But for me to tell a Yid that melacha matzah Shabbos after he made Avdallah, even late Ran is mutter. So Motzei Shabbos is more mutter than Friday afternoon. If you said that, Baruch Shekivanta, that's the Ramah in Darkei Moshe, Sivkat and Ches, and the Ramah in Shulchan Aruch says, Kol shkein b'motzei Shabbos, I could instruct a Yid to do melacha for me, even though it is Shabbos proper for me. And the Magen Avraham explains, why is it Kol shkein? Because in this case, even I could end the Shabbos in a split second by Baruch HaMavdil ben Kodesh L'chol. So we see early Shabbos is somewhat of a machlokes. Late Motzei Shabbos, all agree it's mutter for me to have that hot soup. Again, I don't know if it fits into the Shabbos scheme, but that would be mutter. Now let me ask you an interesting question. I made early Shabbos Friday afternoon, and I decide I want a book, not a sefer, a book. I want to read a book, a newspaper. I'm talking about a newspaper that I read on Shabbos. Can I tell my neighbor, go and buy me a newspaper, get that book for me now? So you're wondering, what's the difference? We just spoke about that. I could tell a Yid to do melacha for me on early Shabbos. But I'll tell you a question that I once heard from a chashuv posek. What's my heter to tell him to go buy me a newspaper? I am talking about melacha on my Shabbos. I'm telling a Yid to do melacha for me on Shabbos. That's v'daber dava. We just learned the Rashba, the Shulchan Aruch, I could tell a Yid to melacha for me on early Shabbos. Maybe that's only a Dvar Mitzvah. Once there's a Dvar Mitzvah or a Tzarech Shabbos, the Issa V'daber Dava is waived. Because there's no V'daber Dava, Malka Mitzvah. So that's why if I need the oven on, I need the lights on, the air conditioner on, I could tell my neighbor to do melacha for me. But if it's not a Dvar Mitzvah, it's not a real Tzairich Shabbos, maybe it's wrong for me to tell him to do it because there's an Issa V'daber Dava. However, I must tell you that the Rashba and the Shulchan Aruch were matter me telling my neighbor to do melacha, and there was no reservation. There was no Bameh Dvar Amurim Dvar Mitzvah. Why not? The answer is very pashut. Because since, as we explained, for him to buy a paper to do a melacha is not Chilul Shabbos, so me instructing him to go buy a paper is not an Issa V'daber Dava. It's not a Maisa Issa, because for him it's not a Maisa Issa. When is V'daber Dava Asa? I'll tell you. If on Shabbos I say I'm going to paint my house tomorrow, so that's Asa for Gans Klal Yisrael. But in this case, I'm telling him buy me a paper, l'chayra, it would be mutter even if it's not a Dvar Mitzvah. Listen to another fascinating question. A woman was decided to Mekabel Shabbos earlier, and I should mention that in this trying times it's a good idea, it's a great schus if women light Shabbos neiros earlier. So she lit a half hour before the Shkia. And then she realized that he forgot to put a light on. Can she ask her young son to put the light on? So you're wondering, what's the shayla? We just learned this. In fact, she could even tell a neighbor, a gadol, to put the light on. So what's the shayla about telling her young son? But listen to this tremendous yisai that I saw. I could ask my neighbor to put on the light, but I can't ask my left hand to put on the light for my right hand. I can't do melacha for myself, right? Since the pasuk says in Parashas Yisroel, "Leisas melacha ata v'incho v'techa," and of course that's not their Chilul Shabbos because that's even a young child, like lahavdil behema. What is the issa of avdecha, behemdecha, and bincha? That's an extension of my Shabbos, the mother's Shabbos. So therefore, reasons the Chavas Yor and the Sefer Makar Chaim and our Simon, the end of Reish Samach Gimel, if a woman tzinded licht, or Makabel Shabbos, actually doesn't say specifically that mashal, but he says when someone's Makabel Shabbos, he cannot instruct his own child to do melacha, because that's a part of his Shabbos. True, you could ask a neighbor, but not your own son. And Rav Sternbach in Chele Gimel, Pei Beis, has also this same analysis. He has a longer tshuva, and he calls it a possible Issa Deraisa to instruct my child to do melacha for me after my early Shabbos. In other words, a neighbor is fine. My son or my daughter is like my left hand for my right hand. While this sounds convincing, it's hard to say. Because the Shulchan Aruch is matir, the Rashba is matir, telling a yid, and doesn't say that children are different. The only question is, what's the svara? The chayra, the Makar Chaim is right. How could I tell my own child that's a part of me? But there's one fundamental difference. Because when a cotton does melacha for me on Shabbos, even if it's loyigi lechinach, it's chilul Shabbos on Shabbos. But when a child does melacha on Friday, for him it's still Friday, it's not chilul Shabbos. How can I be over on chilul Shabbos when there's a melacha done on Friday? Says Rav Vozn in Chelik Vav Siman Lamed Ches. He was asked this question also. Doesn't quote no Makar Chaim, but he says this is not a problem because the child that's doing melacha im etzlam yoim chayil ein oisin melacha. Etzla, he says, it's a chelik zayin lamaches again. Etzla yoim shishi. There's no issa melacha. In other words, it's mamish how you say it. To tell a cotton to do melacha on Shabbos, it's a melacha Shabbos that's attributed to me. To tell a child to do melacha on Friday is not chilul Shabbos. So although the Makar Chaim was machmir, and perhaps someone wants to be machmir like the Makar Chaim, Tavei La Bracha, but Rav Vozna, as I told you in two tshuvas, Vav Lamed Ches Zayin Lamed Hey, is mekel because for the katan it is not yet Shabbos. Now let's really enjoy Simchas HaTorah, and let me tell you two other questions, but I want you to enjoy it as much as I did. So I'm going to make this very clear with one case. I am in America on Erev Shabbos, Friday afternoon. I call to Eretz Yisroel, my Goyish worker, and I tell him, listen, it's a busy season, and let's assume I own a matzah bakery. I say, listen, right after 72 minutes after your Shabbos, open the matzah bakery. I want to do a lot of business. We need to sell matzah. So the guy tells you, boss, whatever you say goes, but you realize that if I open 72 minutes after the Zman Eretz in Israel, I'm working for you on your Shabbos. Because when it's Saturday night, well, as the guy speaks in Eretz Yisroel, it's still Shabbos for you. And then the guy who's a lam, then he explains, I don't have to keep Shabbos. I just can't do work for you on Shabbos. If I'm going to open the matzah bakery right after Shabbos is over, true, in Israel it's not Shabbos, but for you it's Shabbos. Whatever you say, boss, but don't forget, you are doing something wrong. I'm working for you on your Shabbos. That was the guy right? It sounds strange. The guy's doing melacha on Motzei Shabbos. What's the problem? But here's the problem. A guy is never mechuyev to keep Shabbos. Guy sheshavas chayiv misa. It's just attributed to me. So if he's doing melacha for me when it's Shabbos in America, maybe he's right. Let me make this even clearer. I tell a guy, my garage worker here in America on Friday afternoon, I want you to paint my house tomorrow for me. So that's awesome. Even though I told him on Friday, but if he does melacha on Shabbos, it's awesome. So how could I tell him to open the matzah bakery, even though it's after the Zman in Eretz Yisroel, but for me, it's still Shabbos, because I live in America, and there's another 7 hours left to Shabbos. So, although I once found a machmir in this, and there are machmirim, I should say, but there's a big tzad lahakol. How can there be chilul Shabbos if the action took place on Motzei Shabbos? Amir la'akim is also when melacha was done on Shabbos. For example, the other case I mentioned, I tell my goyish worker on Friday, paint my house on Shabbos. So the diba was on Friday, that's fine. But the actual melacha took place by a guy on my Shabbos and his Shabbos. But in this case, the guy is opening the matzah bakery on Motzei Shabbos. Where's the chilul Shabbos? But we could do much better. This is mamish our rashba. If I could tell a yid on the early Shabbos for me to do melacha, because for him it's not Shabbos, so why can't I tell a guy to do melacha when it's Motzei Shabbos? And that seems to be the consensus of the poskim, that I can instruct a guy to do melacha in Eretz Yisroel on Motzei Shabbos, even though for those 7 hours it will be Shabbos for me in America. But wait, the Simchas Torah continues. Let's say I call from America, 5 o'clock, Erev Shabbos. I have a goyish worker in Eretz Yisroel. And I tell him, okay, I want you to do this and this. I want you to do some melacha in my factory in Eretz Yisroel. So the guy says, very shocked, you know my location. It is Shabbos here. I don't think it's by an Einik Shabbos or by a Tish, but that's exactly the time in Eretz Yisroel. This is Mamish Shabbos. So I can do work for you because it's Shabbos here. So you snap back, I'm the boss, and for me it's Friday. He says, but I'm a Shabbos guy on my Shabbos. I can't do that. Who's right? It sounds funny. But this is much worse. Because here, the guy is doing melacha on Shabbos for me. But if you want to really appreciate this question, imagine this, which is very common. I pick up a phone Friday afternoon, and I'm talking to a guy in Eretz Yisroel when it's 12 o'clock Friday night. So I am mamish stimulating melacha that's done by the guy on Shabbos for me. Now again, this sounds really intimidating, but there's one obviously redeeming factor. How is it shaykh chilul Shabbos for me if for me it's 5 o'clock Friday afternoon? Of course the guy is doing melacha on Shabbos. The guy is supposed to do melacha on Shabbos. When is Amir La'akum also? When it's Shabbos for him and Shabbos for me. Here it's Shabbos for him, but it's weekday for me. And I would say, Ikke Chasim in HaSeifa. And that's indeed why the Paiskim, many Paiskim, I can't say all agree, I did find Machmir, but many Paiskim feel that I could talk to a guy and tell him to melacha in Eretz Yisroel when it's Shabbos, but for me it's still Friday. Listen to an interesting Ma'aseh Shahaya Kachaya. Someone had a business, a true story, he had a business in America and went to Eretz Yisroel for a chasana and Shabbos Sheva Brachos. He's sitting by the Shabbos Sheva Brachos in Eretz Yisroel and he realized, I can't believe it. I never had such a question. Here I am, it's Shabbos for me, and my store is open in America because America's 7 hours behind. Is there a problem if his store is being run in America when he's in Eretz Yisroel and it's real Shabbos? Not early Shabbos, it's real Shabbos. So the B'tzei L'Chachman Chele Gimel Kuf Chaf Hei said that's the problem. You have Yidden or Goyim or both working for you on your Shabbos. He says, but the minig is to be Mekel, so we're Mekel. Says the Shraga HaMeir in Chelik Dalet Kuf Yud Beis, he wrote a tshuva to the B'tzei L'Chachma, I don't know what the problem is. Of course in your store, it's in America, melacha is being done. But who cares about your store? The question is you, where are you? What's your location? For you it's Shabbos? Very good. But for them it's weekday. It's not the fact that you have Shabbos, so your store becomes Shabbos. You are in Eretz Yisroel, it's Shabbos, wonderful. But your store's in America it's Friday, and you say you don't have to come on to a minute to be Mekel, there's no source to be Asa. But, and here's the big but, sometimes this question takes a very unfortunate turn. I heard this story from a Yid, B'didei Havi Uvda. He was working Friday afternoon, he's a salesman. He got a call from Ramat Gan in Eretz Yisroel, and it was Friday afternoon around 5 o'clock. And he's talking to an Israeli, and then he said, Slicha, he says, isn't it Shabbos for you? So the person says, yeah, I need a low dati, I'm not worried. So the Yid in America hung up the phone. He was talking to a Yid, selling a Yid an item on Shabbos. So he hung up the phone. So then the phone rang again, he picks it up, and all of a sudden, the Yid said, chutzpah! He was all upset. Rabbi said, it's not a chutzpah. This is a serious lifnei iva. Because even though for me it's Friday afternoon, there's no chilul Shabbos, but if I talk to a Yid in Eretz Yisroel where it's Shabbos, that's a lifnei iva. I'm causing a Yid to do melacha, rachmana litzlan. For me it's Friday, that's totally irrelevant. I'm causing a Yid to do melacha on Shabbos. Now you might say, but a phone call is only a d'Rabbanan, but that is certainly wrong. It might be a d'Rabbanan, but the Yid that causes that Friday Yid to do melacha is ayvan adaraisa of lifnei iva. And as the Minchas Chinuch and Reish Lamed Beis says, if I cause a Yid to do Issa d'Rabbanan, he did an Issa d'Rabbanan, but I had an Issa d'Raisa of lifnei iva. Because even Issa d'Rabbanan is at least like an Eita Sheina Haigenis. So I must stress, what we're talking about this morning was telling a guy and a guy do malacha. Whenever there's a Yid involved, Rachmana litzlan, you're talking about a serious lifnei iva. And someone asked, but what's the Eitzah? So I told them what Rabbi Yashiv once responded to that question. They asked him, what's the Eitzah of a certain problem? So he said, Vezok sudan Eitzah for alt. Who said there's an Eitzah? I can't be mata lifnei iva. So again, let's be clear, we're talking about Goyim, but with a Yid, a Fry Yid is lifnei iva. Also, I want to make a point that when we spoke about the time zones, America, Eretz Yisroel, the same is also applicable from New York to California, where there's a 3-hour difference. Of course, it's not as dramatic, but the same questions apply. Now, consider the next question. I am Friday afternoon in my business, and I send a fax to Eretz Yisroel, or fax, or any correspondence, email. I do something in America on Friday afternoon that goes all the way to Eretz Yisroel, and it causes a melacha to take place in Eretz Yisroel when it's Shabbos proper. So if the receiver is a Fraya Yid, we're talking about Lifnei Iva. We're talking about either the guy receives it, or there's no response, it's registered, I send email, without any Lifnei Iva. So this, you're wondering, what's the Shaila? For me it's Friday, how can I be Mechalal Shabbos? But you have to think about that and reanalyze this question. Because true, I'm in America on Friday, but my melacha goes all the way to Eretz Yisroel. Maybe that's like I have a long yada richter that goes all the way from America and does melacha in Eretz Yisroel. And indeed, the melacha Mamnayach Yitzchak Zilberstein in the end of Amud Kov Beis considers this to be the truth. I can't do a melacha in America that goes all the way to Eretz Yisroel. But the truth is, I saw many poskim that say this can't be, and even the melacha Mamnayach just throws out the question. I don't think he held like that lamaisa, because my hand didn't go to Eretz Yisroel. I activated a keli, technology, to do melacha in Eretz Yisroel. That's not me. If I would be able to stretch my hand from America to Eretz Yisroel, theoretically, that might be a problem. But says Reb Shlomo Zalman, Yomtov Sheini Hilchos Amud Reish Pei Aleph Shevet Alevi Ches Mem Gimel, and the Vayoshev Moshe Aleph Kuf Yud Tes, and the Emek Tshuva Siman Lamed Aleph regarding an answering machine. This isn't really a problem. The Knei Boisim in Chelik Gimel Siman Yudalid is also Mekel. He has a different problem, Ayin Sham, but I saw the Mikdanas Eliyahu in Chelik Aleph Kuf Gimel correctly assumed that that's not a problem. So I think we could say I could send a fax, email, or any melacha. And again, remote control would be a perfect example. I could using remote control, start a melacha taking place in Eretz Yisroel, because at the end of the day, I am Friday, my hand did not extend to Eretz Yisroel, and therefore there is no Chilul Shabbos as far as I'm concerned. Now the poskim do caution, if you send any type of correspondence that makes noise in the receiver's home, l'mashal, you talk on a answering machine, and they're singing Zmira Shabbos, and you start telling them a whole speech, that is disparaging Kedusha Shabbos. That's Av Shemilsa, which is not just a heritage, the Gemara in Masechta Shabbos, it's capacity in the Shulchan Aruch Reish Nun Beis, that Av Shemilsa is an Issa D'Rabbanan. So any noise that contradicts the serenity of Shabbos, or even some people say sending a fax, and it comes into the person's house and it makes a noise. Okay, regarding a fax, some also say that the paper is muktzah, but that's not my point. The point is, the aside that I want to say is that I am in America Friday, and I somehow do melacha in Eretz Yisroel through technology, but if I didn't put my hand in Eretz Yisroel, that's like a long string that I pull from my house in Eretz Yisroel, or remote control, or it's like putting up a Ruach Shalom Friday afternoon. And indeed, to send a fax or email or anything else without the problem of Av Shemilsa should be mutter. Now we heard a shaila, a baby was born late Friday afternoon in America, and the people wanted to call the grandparents in Eretz Yisroel. So again, to call and leave a message, and the receivers hear the message, that seems to be Av Shemilsa. But they had an idea. They would call the Goyish Aid, who's living with the grandparents in Eretz Yisroel, and the Goyish Aid would pick up the phone, and they would relay the message through the Goyish Aid. So that's fine. The guy can pick up the phone, even though the guy is in Shabbos, but the guy is picking up the phone for their own purpose. But here's the question. If the grandparent sees the phone ringing and tells the Goyish Aid, pick up the phone, that's Amir La'akum for the grandparent, because they're in Eretz Yisroel, the guy's in Eretz Yisroel, and melacha is taking place in Eretz Yisroel. Now, some people like to call their parents in Eretz Yisroel, wish them a good Shabbos, and they speak into the answering machine. That's not really a good Shabbos. That's really sort of an Av Shemilsa. You're causing sound to be created in a Shabbos home, and that certainly should be avoided. And now we come to the last group of questions. And let me be very clear, we are changing the setting, we're changing the story. Till now we spoke about Shabbos, now we're talking about Yomtov Sheini. And here's the case, one case. I live in Chutz Laretz, I'm zayich to go to Eretz Yisroel for Yomtov. So Yomtov Sheini, let's talk in an extreme case. For me, Achrein Shel Pesach, Habo Leinu L'Toiva, for the people in Eretz Yisroel, is Isru Chag. Tzirik to the Geld, Tzirik to the Welt is a regular day that's no longer Yomtiv. So picture the scenario. I am by my Eretz Yisroel relatives in Eretz Yisroel. For me, it's Yomtov Sheini with all the restrictions. I don't wear tefillin, and I daven Yom Tov, I make Kiddush, and for them it's Isru Chag. Can I ask my relative, the Ben Eretz Yisroel, to do melacha for me? For them it's Isru Chag, for me it's Yomtov Sheini. I know it's a little disorienting, but it's very simple. I'm going to have a day of Yomtov Sheini in an environment that is Isru Chag. So Rabbi say, what's the shayla? For me I can't do melacha, how could I ask them? But for us today it's Mosek Midvash. This is Mamish the Rashba. Because true for me it's Yomtov Sheini, but for my relatives it's Isru Chag. Just like I could tell my neighbor to do melacha for me on early Shabbos, even though it's Shabbos for me, but for them it's okay. So certainly Yomtov Sheini. And indeed, the Marikash in his Chuvas Ola Yakov Simon Tzaddik was asked this very question, and he says emphatically, Ein shum nidnud Issa leben chutz la'aretz im yoimu leben Eretz Yisroel las le melacha b'yomtov sheini. This is in Simon Tzaddik of Ola Yakov, and his source is our Rashba. But Rabbi say, perhaps we could even go a step further. Maybe not only the Rashba would permit this, even the Ran would also permit it. Because me, right now, I can't do melacha on Yomtov Sheini. But if I decide I am staying in Eretz Yisroel, Avas Eretz Yisroel overtakes me, I am staying in Eretz Yisroel, I'm living in Eretz Yisroel for the rest of my life. Guess what? I could do melacha Yomtov Sheini. So maybe this is even better than the early Shabbos case where the Ran had reservations because you can't do melacha on Shabbos. Here it's possible that I could even do melacha Yomtov Sheini even today if I decide with a sincere resolution to stay in Eretz Yisroel. So therefore, Yomtov Sheini, I could tell my relative do melacha for me according to all days. However, the Ginas V'Rodim, who lived after the Marikash, in Daled Yud Zayin, quotes this Marikash and he says, I have a big problem. But listen to his beautiful Einfall, it's Klal Dalet Simon Yud Zayin, the Mamaschel V'Su. He says, let's reanalyze that point. A ben chutz la'aretz never, ever, ever could do melacha Yomtov Sheini in Eretz Yisroel. If he decides to change his status and move to Eretz Yisroel, he became a ben Eretz Yisroel. Then he could do melacha. But a ben chutz la'aretz is never able to do melacha on Yomtov Sheini. So therefore, reasons the Ginas V'Rodim ein shom afsheris leben chutz la'aretz kol oid sheshmoy alav liyoshayich behetem melacha b'Yomtov Sheini. And he has a beautiful raya. The Gemara says that an Eved is not yet Yeshnei Begittin and different halacha ramification, but an Eved has no shaykhs to Gittin. You can become a Ben Chayrin. Teretz when he's a Ben Chayrin, he's not an Eved. So a Ben Eretz Chutz La'aretz can never do melacha. And even though that's a Dakas de Kataina, but you should know that Birkei Yosef and Tov Tzadik Vav Dalid, Rabbi Kiva Ega on the page, Tov Tzadik Vav, the Pasa Shulchan and Beis Tezvav, Ramoish and Dalid Kov Zayin, Mincha Shloim and Yutes Gimel. And this seems to be the Minig Yisrael, that a Ben Chutz La'aretz in Eretz Yisrael, where Machmei should not do melacha on Yomtov Sheini, he should not ask a Ben Eretz Yisrael to do melacha for him. Apparently, it's the Taina of the Ginas V'Rodim, and I would also believe it's because Yomtov Sheini does need great chizuk, and therefore we try to keep this control. Now, consider the next question. I am the same Ben Chutz La'aretz, I went to Eretz Yisrael for Yom Tov, the same story. But I have another shayla. I have a business, a flourishing business in Eretz Yisrael. So I'm going to keep Yomtov Sheini with all its halachos. That's what halacha dictates, I'm fine. Can my business remain open? For them it's Isru Chag. Can I have my business, whether it's Yidden or Goyim, continue, Tzarik to the Geld, Tzarik to the Welt, it's Isru Chag? And this is very common for those that have business in Eretz Yisrael. But the emes is, Zok Rav Moshe, in that beautiful tshuva that I mentioned, Chelik Dal Kuv Zayin, for me to tell them to open up, you got to work, come on, it's Isru Chag is wrong. Because I can't tell them to do melacha, so I can tell them to work for me, for my store. But if they open because for them it's Isru Chag, there's no problem, because there's no dibur to them. Reb Shlomo Zalman in Mincha Shloima Aleph Yates is also Mekel, but it's more than a technicality, because they are doing their thing. Now, it happens to be they're working for me, but could be they forgot about that. They're working for themselves to make parnasa. So here it comes somewhat ironic. I can't instruct them to do melacha, and if they decide they don't want to work, I can't force them to go to work. But if they do go on their own, I could allow my store to be open because it's a Eretz Yisroel enterprise. Now let me ask you a really intriguing question. Can I, in Yomtov Sheini, ask a guy to do melacha for me? I won't ask my neighbor, I won't ask my relative because you told me not to. Can I ask a guy? So the answer is, what's the shaila? If you can't ask a yid, how could you ask a guy? But I want to say a bigger chiddush. Even like the marikash, that I could ask my relative to do melacha for me, because for them it's Isru Chag, it makes sense I can't have a guy do melacha. Why? Because for my relative it's Yomtiv, it's Isru Chag. The guy doesn't have Yomtiv Sheini, Isru Chag, it's the status of the Yid. So if I am having Yomtov Sheini in Eretz Yisroel, so the guy follows my status. So it comes out a big chiddush, I think it's true, that I can light the marikash, which we don't pass in that way, but I just want to bring out that point. I can ask a yid do melacha for me, but I can't ask a guy. But let me just be clear, we pass, you don't ask a yid either, but I wanted you to have that beautiful chiddush lahalacha. Listen to a different question. But imagine I am the Ben Eretz Yisroel. I live in Eretz Yisroel. I have a factory in America. Can I allow the factory to operate on Yomtov Sheini in America? In other words, for me it's Isru Chag, and I tell the factory, yeah, you could open up on Isru Chag, even though in Eretz Yisrael, even though in America, it is purely Yomtov Sheini. So obviously, if I have Yiddish workers, Chalila v'Chilila me open, that's the Fneiva. I have all Goyish workers, and I'm talking about I have a factory in a business district. It has a non-Jewish sounding name. No one knows it's mine. There's no Zilzal Yomtiv. There's no Lifnei. So here we have a reverse scenario. A Ben Eretz Yisrael, who's in Eretz Yisrael. He's not here. He's in Eretz Yisrael. Can he have a factory of Goyish workers working on Yomtov Sheini in America? For him, it's Isru Chag. So Rav Shlomo Zalman and Mincha Shloim and Aleph Yutes Gimel has only one concern. The main concern is Zilzal of Yomtiv. If it's Befahesi Aydei Nachrim, if it's Yadua, it belongs to the Yid, that's probably a Zilzal Yomtiv. But our case, as we outlined, where it's not a Zilzal Yomtiv, it's not Lifnei Iva, it is quite possible that that's Mutta as long as no one will connect the factory to the Yiddish worker. How about this question? I am the same person for now. I'm the Ben Eretz Yisroel. In Eretz Yisroel and Isru Chag Pesach. I call my Goyish worker who's in America, and I start talking to him, and I tell him to do something for me. So l'chayra, there's no problem, because for me it's Isru Chag. There's no zilzal if a guy does melacha, and I found in Shevet Kasi in Beis Kuf Ayin Zayin that says just this. He says, like I told you, that he is no reason to be machmer. He heard of Rava's machmer. He doesn't understand why. He thinks it's pashit beli pikbuk. Now listen to a interesting question, but I'm going to change settings for one moment. I am back to being in America. Okay? I tell my Yiddish worker in Eretz Yisroel, please do business for me. Open my matzah bakery right after Shabbos is over for you. So that, we said earlier, is fine. Because for me, it's Shabbos, I understand, but for the guy that's doing it, it's not Shabbos. My only question is this tali in the previous machlok is marikash versus Gines V'Rodim, where we saw that the Gines V'Rodim says that even though Lamaisa, you could change and become a Ben Eretz Yisrael, but since you are Chutz La'aretz, there's no heta to have someone do melacha for you. Does that same machlokes apply to this question? So I saw in the Shabbos b'Shabbatay Tafresh Lamed Aleph and Amakatay had a beautiful shtickle on this whole sugya, and he says this case is much better because I don't have to change my status of Ben Chutz La'aretz to Ben Eretz Yisroel, because all I have to do is fly to Eretz Yisroel before Shabbos, and I could do melacha on the same Matzai Shabbos like they do. So that's much more biyadi. I don't have to change my status. I have to just find my location in Eretz Yisroel. And that's why it's mutter l'chol hadayis. And achrein chaviv, let me share with you another question that seems totally on a different part, but it's really the same sugya. I am makpid, l'mashal, to keep 72 minutes for doing melacha Matzai Shabbos. My neighbor is fine with 60. Can I ask him after 60 for him to do melacha for me if it's before 72 for me? Or more commonly, I don't open cans or bottles or wrappers, and my friend does. Can I ask him to do melacha for me? So in a certain sense, this is a little trickier than the previous questions. Because the earlier questions, I'm having a guy do melacha. So, a Shabbos guy, okay. But here I'm telling a Yid, and I think you should wait for 72. He doesn't. But I'm telling him do melacha, what for me is Shabbos, or open a can. Or maybe, since his minig is to be mekel, what's the problem? So here we come to what's really the last piece of the puzzle, and it's mamish part of our sugya. The same Darkei Moshe in Sifkat and Ches that I mentioned earlier, where the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Rashba, Darkei Moshe asks a startling question. The Torah in the end of Taf Reish Chav Daled writes that if some tzaddikim v'anshei ma'aseh kept 2 days Yom Kippur. It's not recommended, but they did it. So the Torah says you have to be safe, of course, but they can instruct someone that's not keeping the second day Yom Kippur to do melacha for them. Freg the Darkei Moshe, how do we reconcile these two halachos? You can't tell a Yid that's keeping Yom Kippur to do melacha for you, but the Rashba says that if I make early Shabbos, I could tell you to do melacha for me. Says Darkei Moshe, a beautiful pasha to your side. I made early Shabbos, but I don't think he's doing wrong. I'm right, and he's right. Shalom al Yisrael. I could ask him to do melacha for me. But if I truly believe that you have to keep 2 days Yom Kippur, I'm not doing it because I'm nervous. I feel you need 2 days Yom Kippur. So for me, it's a chil Yom Kippur that he's doing melacha. So I'm not going to tell him what to do. But to have him do melacha for me, that's like a very serious issa. Because I hold it's asa to do melacha, and therefore I can instruct him to do it. So Rabbi say, based on this, I saw Rav Vozna in Shevet Levi Aleph Nun Gimel and Rav Sternbuch and Aleph Reish Lamed Daled say, in response to our group of questions, it depends how you view your shita. If you hold like Rabbeinu Tam 100%, and you really believe until 72 is Chilul Shabbos, don't ask your neighbor to do melacha for you. I mean, he has his right to his opinion, but you can't ask the melacha for you. But if you don't really hold it's asa, it's a chumrah. Or a more common case of the opening cans, you hold, I know, there's a lot of makilim, I like to be machmir. But if it's not an issa, you could ask him to do melacha for you. But if you hold it's an issa gomer, then we point to that Darkei Moshe, that it's asa. So let's chaz over what we learned today, Be'ez Hashem. We definitely saw Torah is the best of schayra. Hopefully you have Tein L'chacham V'yech Gemoid. But basically, in response to our original question, the answer is no. You can't be Mechalel Shabbos if it's not yet Shabbos. You can't be Mechalel Yomtov if it's not yet Yomtov. But, as we said, you have to know the story. If I already kept Shabbos and I fly from England with a Concorde into a Shabbos country, it's Shabbos. It's a bonus, another Shabbos. I have to keep Shabbos. If I have a long string that pulls a light on from America to Eretz Yisroel or remote control, it's not a Yad HaRichta. It's me doing melacha on Friday and Gesund Heit. Vending machines are allowed to be left open. As far as melacha is concerned, that's Shvisas Kalim, that's Mutter. We had the Chsam Sofer, the Beis Meir, Side of Gufay Noch, but don't forget there is still ways of Chilul Shabbos, of Shvisas Behemtai, Ketanim, and Akum. Most important, we saw the Gemara in Shabbos, that I could tell my friend to go to my orchard that's out of my tchum, because for him it's within his tchum. The Rashbi explained it's not a Ma'aseh Issa, but the Rashbi extended that to an early Shabbos. I made Shabbos, it's me, it's Shabbos 100%, but I could tell him to do melacha because it's not yet Shabbos. And we also saw perhaps another heta, because the fact that I too didn't have to make early Shabbos, that might give me some leverage on my own. But at the end of the day, it seemed that the Paiskim say that as long as what I tell him to do is not Chilul Shabbos for him, it's not Asa for me, and it's not a violation of a Daber Dava. And therefore, even after I was Makabel Shabbos and davened and said Kiddush, I'm fully in Shabbos, I can instruct him to do melacha for me. And it came out that we said even for a non-essential Shabbos need l'chari, there's no Isra Daber Dava, and it's mutter. And we also saw, when I keep a late Mitzvah Shabbos, I could instruct a Yid that already made Havdalah, if it's after this man, to cook me a hot soup for Shalosh Shuddis. We saw that according to Rav Vozna, a mother could tell her young child after she was Makabel Shabbos, as long as the child wasn't, to do melacha for her. It's not like part of her, it's a Friday melacha for her on Shabbos. Me in America, I could tell a guy in Eretz Yisroel to do melacha on Mitzvah Shabbos in Eretz Yisroel, even though for me it's Shabbos. I could tell to do melacha in Eretz Yisroel on Shabbos, or I could talk on phone to a guy in Eretz Yisroel on Shabbos, because for me it's Friday, and we have to have Shabbos on both ends. In Eretz Yisroel, on Shabbos, a store could be open that I own, even though, because Lamaisa, even though it's Shabbos for me, but Lamaisa, even though I'm in Eretz Yisroel on Shabbos, my store's open on Friday in Chutz La'aretz, it's fine, because I'm not doing melacha. Whenever you have a fryer person involved, there's a serious lifnei eva. It doesn't seem to be an eitzah. I could send a fax or talk to an answering machine or any other communication when it's in America on Friday and it goes to Eretz Yisroel. It's not a yad arichta. The only issue is av shemilsa. I could call a guy in Eretz Yisroel and talk to him, even though for him it's Shabbos, unless it's an av shemilsa issue. A ben chutz la'aretz should not tell an Eretz Yisroel dikah do melacha for Yomtov Sheini for the ben chutz la'aretz. A ben Eretz Yisroel could work in the factory that it's owned by a ben chutz la'aretz, and as long as he doesn't tell him to be open, it's fine. Me in Eretz Yisroel on Yomtov Sheini, I can't tell a guy to do melacha. For me, even like the Marikash, as we said, a ben Eretz Yisroel has a factory in chutz la'aretz. If there is certainly no zilzul Shabbos, which is not the case, usually there is, but if there's no zilzul Yomtiv or lefnei eva, the factory could remain open. A ben Eretz Yisroel in America could call a guy in Yomtov Sheini in chutz la'aretz. And as we said, to tell a yid to do melacha for me it might only be a chumrah. Then I could tell him, if I hold this asa mamish, it's taka problem, and let's hope that the schus of Torah of all Yidden should bring us Yeshuas and Refuas for Gans Klal Yisrael. Thank you very much.